Joining us now, he's in the House, Senator Frank Wagner, running for governor. Okay, Frank, let's get to your governor's campaign. What's your vision here?
Well, right now, I think the vision is clearly we need to grow the economy. We need to create jobs. The question is, how do you go about doing it? You know, if you hear my ads, you know, we've created jobs. I've started businesses in Virginia. I've literally employed hundreds of people. And these are the hardworking. These are ship fitters, welders, pipe fitters, the people I admire. I've worked around these people my entire career, and I cannot do the things they do. One of the real disturbing things that I see about the workforce that I had was the age of the workforce. It was the same age as I am. And we're not getting young people attracted to it. We're not getting young people to get interested in the career technical education fields. These are very high-paying jobs. I just had a conversation with a gentleman who owns another company. His technicians make more than his engineers. In other words, the technicians, the people that go out in the field and actually do the work. I had dinner up in Richmond last week with a gentleman that owns an air conditioning company, and his technicians are making $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year, and he's having to train his own, but he cannot find people. So this is a repeated story all over Virginia. So if you want to talk about starting to grow the economy, what can we do? There are plenty of jobs available out there today. There's just nobody trained to do the jobs. Now, do you fault the job creators? I certainly don't. I fault, the education system that's training students who obviously are not prepared to take the jobs that are available, nor the jobs that we talk about in the future. So one of the key aspects in this vision that I have for Virginia is to really look at the education system within Virginia and ask ourselves, what can we do to make the changes necessary to start to turn out the types of students that will fill the jobs that are going to be available in a high-tech industry, but across the board. And these not necessarily are college related. In fact, many of them don't require a 4-year university degree to get. And quite frankly, the people that do these jobs end up making more money oftentimes than the people with the 4-year college degree. Many of them go on to start their own companies and become, employers in their own rights and multimillionaires. There's many, many stories across Virginia of people that pursued these careers. And so I think it's important. It somehow we have in the mindset of people across the nation that you've got to go to college to have a future. And I would put up to you, no, you don't have to. In fact, if you really want a future, you might want to get some technical skills in emerging places that are very exciting in the economy and move forward. So that's one basic aspect that we look at it, because every candidate will tell you, I want to stimulate the economy, I want to grow jobs, we're going to make changes in Virginia. Well, you have to look and say, okay, well, what's holding that back? And certainly when and we talked about education in there. The other key element, as you know, I arrived late due to transportation problems, is transportation throughout Virginia. And the transportation issues, I think, are well renowned in certainly the metropolitan areas, Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads here where I live. But I would submit to you that if you live in Southside Virginia, you have a transportation problem. Your transportation problem is you don't have a network necessary to grow your economy. Same true in Southwest Virginia. If you live up and down the Shenandoah Valley, you have an economic artery called Interstate 81 that's full of cholesterol that needs to be addressed if you expect to continue to grow and expand your economy. So transportation is another key element. Education and transportation are two core functions that business cannot do for themselves. That is the responsibility of government. It's mandated in the Constitution of Virginia, and it's one that clearly we've dropped the ball on. And we made a step to kind of fill in a gap that we had back in 2313, but we haven't taken the steps necessary, I think, to move the economy forward. And I would ask folks, two simple questions. Do you feel the transportation network we have today is adequate for the economy we have today? And I think most Virginians, if you polled that, would say no.
No, it's not.
Okay, and do you feel that we have to diversify the economy of Virginia?
Yes.
And most Virginians would say yes. Well, how are you going to diversify and build the economy of Virginia if you have a transportation network that's inadequate for the economy we have today? And yet, that's a core function of government. Those are the two issues. So it's not enough, I don't think, to come out and talk about jobs and job creation without coming up with the solutions to fix it. Okay, and these are two things. We're talking about a massive, at the federal level, investment in infrastructure. We don't have the talent pool today to put the infrastructure in we have today. How are we going to handle this massive new investment of doing that? And so those are two elements of let's turn Virginia's economy around. And I think the third element is government itself. Okay, if we just issued permits and got permits out the door, we could stimulate Virginia's economy by 10 or 15% today. And what am I talking about? Let's talk about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline.
Right.
A $7-8 billion investment in the economy of Virginia, just the infrastructure, putting the infrastructure in, not to mention the businesses that will attract because of this cheap natural gas flowing through Virginia.
Absolutely.
And natural gas is obviously an energy source, but it's also a raw material that's converted into many things. And so that's just one small example. But I have VML and VACO now going out and polling all the localities across Virginia saying, how many investment dollars do you have tied up today waiting on permits? I could take you through the transportation projects in this area and walk you through and say, we would be building this today if the permits were issued. We would be building this today if the permits were issued. So it's the permitting holding back, and that's without even going into the private sector. I hear from companies all over Virginia that either choose not to make the investment because the permits are so hard to get, or are delayed in making those investments because they're not issuing permits. And the cost of the project, in other words, the payment from the people, has ultimately done that. So, when we start talking about reducing regulation, that's certainly a part of it. That drives the cost of doing business up and costs Virginians jobs. But it's also issuing the permits, and the permits are directly tied to the regulation underlying it. And so those two phases, I think, drive together. Those three components, if you really want to stimulate and turn the economy around, we've got to have a serious, long talk about transportation. Mm-hmm. We have to have a serious, long talk about the education, the types of education we're putting out, and then changes made. And we have to have a serious self-look at our own government and what we can do to streamline permits, reduce ridiculous regulation, and have regulation in place and tell our government people that make these decisions that you have a finite amount of time to decide on a permit. And the answer may be no, but don't sit there for month after month and tell me your desk is too filled up and you can't get to it, because all that does is just drive it back further and further. And when you talk to folks, that's the problems in Virginia right now. Clearly, things that we can do that will have real impact into doing that. And then you get out of the way of the businesses and let them create the jobs. And they'll move forward and they'll take that through. But I look at Southside Virginia and say, we're not going to fix Southside Virginia, and it's going to be a drain on the rest of Virginia. And I want every area of Virginia to be prosperous and growing. So what can we do in Southside Virginia? Well, it's two things, and all you have to do is look across the border in North Carolina. Winston-Salem, Greensboro, economy's on fire. What do they have that we don't have in Southside Virginia? And it's a transportation network, and it's broadband internet access.
Right.
We have got to wire Virginia with broadband internet access. Till we make that decision, and I'm ready to make that decision on behalf of those areas in Virginia, Southside and Southwest Virginia, to say, yes, we're going to make that investment in broadband internet access, and we're going to make that investment in transportation so that economy can transform itself. They're hardworking people out there. They're ready to do something. We have to give them that vision out there to say, we're prepared to make that investment out of Richmond because we want you to prosper. We want you to contribute to the state and not continue to have to subsidize the education systems and many of the things we do. We want you at 2% unemployment, not 12, 14% unemployment, 9% unemployment. And the same issues involved in Southwest Virginia. The Coalfields Expressway, a project that must be built if we're going to change the economy down there. Interstate 73, I-73, which will open up the economy all through Southside Virginia, right up through Roanoke, and continues. These are positive transportation plans. Now, we can't get I-73 built. Right. In one 4-year governor's term. But the permitting I talked about, that type of thing. What we can do is have I-73 in such a position that it cannot be stopped from being built in 4 years. Over time. We can it'll be beyond stopping and we'll move forward. So I think those things. We need to look at Route 58. Make 58 a limited access, true limited access highway all the way out to the new I-73. That will provide connectivity through the entire Southside Virginia.
It's connectivity that we need. Senator, let me ask you this. What, in your mind right now, is Terry McAuliffe's Virginia legacy?
Well, I think that Terry McAuliffe's Virginia legacy was probably delivered. I think his major motivation in the governor is to make sure that Virginia voted for Hillary Clinton. He went to no ends to make sure that, including blanket granting rights restored for felons without even a review of that, just to ensure that and then making sure that those felons got registered to vote. He did everything in his power to deliver Virginia, and quite frankly, I think in that regard, he was successful.
Yes.
Virginia was delivered for Hillary Clinton.
Handily.
And I think clearly he would, if Hillary had won the election, he'd be packing his bags, if not moved already, and Ralph Northam would be ascending the governor's mansion, and Tim Kaine's staff would be all up in Washington ready to support the vice president. So I think clearly that was his primary motivation. Terry's a very outgoing guy. Governor McAuliffe's a very outgoing guy, always a positive attitude, always, that type of thing. I think he's worked very hard overseas to try to bring companies in. I question that philosophy rather than traveling all over the world. I would much rather have prospects come to Virginia. Rather than saying Virginia's a great state and telling them all about it, I'd much rather have trips paid for people, realistic prospects, to come to Virginia, to show them the great areas we have in Southside Virginia, the 58 corridor, those types of things, and start to get folks interested. I think that would have been far more effective if part of your economic development, and certainly that's part of it, is to attract overseas industry to invest in your state and attract other areas. I would have spent a lot of time mining California as governor. California is regulating themselves out of existence, and there's certainly all kinds of opportunities to relocate to Virginia. So I look at other states as prospects. You better believe other states are looking at Virginia and what can we steal from Virginia. So it's a very competitive environment out there, as it should be. But I think his overseas focus was well, we can question why. I won't go into why, but it would certainly help if you spent a lot of time overseas to build your resume for Secretary of Commerce. But I'm not sure that was the issue or not. But I think certainly as we look forward to this campaign, a lot of areas weren't addressed that need to be addressed. I mentioned a few of them early on about the state police and that type of thing. So I don't know of any great policy initiatives that were moved forward. The transportation bill happened under Governor McDonnell's aegis. Certainly a port turnaround, but the port turnaround, I think, had a lot more to do about the types of contracts that were issued.
His legacy is he was a great salesman for Virginia, no question about it. And let's give him
absolutely
that.
Absolutely.
And I've been a cheerleader for that. And he carried Virginia handily for Hillary Clinton. Let's get to your candidacy, and we'll get to the Republican nomination in a minute. If you are the nominee, why do you think you're best equipped to beat the Democratic nominee, Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam?
Well, let me just say this, that I think everybody who's studied Virginia politics understands that a Republican cannot win statewide unless he wins Hampton Roads. Can't be done. Numerically, you'll lose Virginia if history is any track record. It seems to be a very good track record. So you've got to win. You've got to win in Hampton Roads. And I think, the other statewide candidates on the Republican side are from Northern Virginia, and not from Hampton Roads. And Ralph Northam is, lieutenant governor, was a state senator representing Norfolk. Hampton Roads likes their own. And the independents, I believe, will break for a local fellow over somebody out of Northern Virginia, and without the independents, you can't win Hampton Roads. If you don't win Hampton Roads, you can't win statewide. And I mean, that's just from a pure strategic political standpoint, that's the go. So if you're going to win statewide, a Republican's got to win Hampton Roads, and I'd submit to you that out of the 3 announced gubernatorial candidates, and even if you add in Riggleman, I'm the only one that can beat Ralph Northam in Hampton Roads, and that's going to be instrumental if you're going to win statewide. And I think also they said, well, what are you going to do about Northern Virginia? Well, I think it's important to remember that I grew up in Arlington. Went grew up. I was actually born in England. My dad was in the U.S. Navy and stationed overseas in London. He died when I was 6 months old under very mysterious circumstances. My mom immediately moved back to Falls Church, Virginia. Grew up there. She remarried. Ultimately, I went to my parents' wedding in Fort Belvoir. Went to kindergarten in Fort Belvoir. Went to first grade in Fort Hood, Texas. He retired and came right back. He taught high school for Marshall High School from the time it was open. Very, very popular teacher in Marshall High School. I'm shocked when I go up to Northern Virginia how many people who are now in their 60s and 50s remember my dad, Major Earl, and all the girls called him Majie, all the guys called him Major Earl, and it's amazing how many people in Northern Virginia remember my dad and remember me. I went to Washington Lee High School and Stratford Junior High, Woodmont Elementary. Actually spent a year in Lanier Intermediate out in Fairfax.
You've got both Navy and Pearl, so you've got deep ties to Northern Virginia. So the Gillespie operatives are telling me, look, Frank Wagner is a tax raiser. We're going to hit him on that. How do you respond to that?
Well, when it came to general fund tax raises that were attempted over the years, I voted against every one of those. Okay, when it comes to tax raising, yes, the transportation bill of 2313 raised taxes, and I will remind you that it was the Speaker's bill, that Governor McDonald signed it, that obviously Democrats and Republicans in a bipartisan manner voted for it. If it hadn't happened, today we would be in a situation where there would be absolutely no money for new construction, and we would not have sufficient transportation funds to maintain the existing infrastructure. Unacceptable. I will also point out that every dollar we raised during that was reinvested back into transportation and that. So if those operatives, and it's interesting, I'm tired of hearing from operatives. You're hearing from the candidate. You know, when people have to speak through operatives, that worries me very much. That is a politician. When you speak through operatives, get out there and tell us exactly yourself and tell us in front of the crowd, because I don't feel we've done enough in transportation, quite frankly. And I think we put up, and it's a compromise, an artful compromise that I supported because we had to fix the problem. But we have a tax mechanism in place, a sales tax, that actually punishes taxpayers when they can least afford to pay it. As prices rise, because it's a percentage tax, people pay more taxes. We need to scrap that and come back in and say, look, while prices are low, we're going to collect a few more taxes. But if it ever gets back up to where it was before, we'll actually take less money out of your pocket. So it's a tax decrease, but it's a tax increase. So we're going to take advantage of these lower fuel prices and collect more money so that we can build out the infrastructure. Those changes I talked about, Route 58, I-73, Coalfields Expressway, fixing 81, none of those are going to get done unless we raise more money and make that investment in transportation. Now, that's the difference. A politician will say, yeah, tax increaser. A businessman says, you know what, I'm going to make a calculated investment and expect a return on that investment. And that return is that we're going to have the roads, and then we won't have to have such general fund money going out of our budget on the general fund side to take care of those that can't take care of themselves because the infrastructure is not in place for them to get a job. And it's really that simple. So a businessman does that all the time. He makes investments and expects a return on the investment. So I'm talking about, we'll make an investment on roads and expect a return on that investment. And most everybody understands that. So let them attack me. And my question back to the candidate, and hopefully the candidate will answer us and not as operatives, but let's see what he says. Does that mean his first motion when he becomes governor, if he becomes governor, which he never will, but we need to get that answer out of him now, is you'll undo the bill that we did in 2313? I need to hear from the candidate. Let's see if he'll actually speak. Okay, will you undo that bill? Is that your first motion? And come out and campaign on it. Okay, and tell us you're going to undo that bill and scrap it. And I'd be very interested to see. So again, aren't operatives fun? The little people you can't see and all that kind of stuff. You know, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've won every election I've been in. And I've won because I'm honest with people. I tell them the truth. I speak my mind. And people say, "You gave a speech. It sounds like you're talking directly to me." And I say, "Yeah, that's who I am. I'm not this plastic figure, that's prompted up, that has a speechwriter that does those things. I understand what it is I want to do. I speak my heart. I speak my mind. And you'll never catch me in a lie because I speak the truth. And you may not like it, but I'm going to roll out that transportation thing. And that's going to be a significant part of it. Because the money isn't there to build I-73. Mm-hmm. The money's not there to fix 58. The money's not there for the Coalfields Expressway. And quite frankly, the money's not there to make the kind of changes on 81 that needs to happen, not to mention what we need to do here in Hampton Roads. Now, part of the solution has been, and I fought this effort, but it came out of the House side, is, you know what, every road we build now, every addition, we're going to toll it, have hot lanes. Right, so if you have money, you don't have to wait in traffic. You can drive on the hot lanes and do that. Okay, but here's the problem with that: every one of these put up a toll. Now you're going to take $2 out of a taxpayer's pocket. You're going to take $1 to build that highway, and you're going to take another $1 to send it to Wall Street to finance the project. Mm-hmm. And you know what? We borrowed enough money at the federal level that our kids, our grandkids, and probably our great grandchildren are going to have to deal with a national debt. Do we want to continue down this road in Virginia?
So you would rather just find a way to get the revenue in Virginia one time and pay for the road?
Well, what I'd like to do is while fuel prices are low, have a graduated tax where we collect more money today.
A gasoline tax.
An
increased gasoline tax.
No, a shift from a percentage tax, which we have today,
right,
to back to a per gallon tax with a little bit higher tax today at these lower prices, and if ever gets back up to those high numbers we had before, the $4 or $5, right. Actually it'll be lower. It'll be lower than the tax you're collecting today.
All right, so you want to pay for the infrastructure by increasing what you're going to pay for gasoline while prices are low, and you think you can sell that. I'm not challenging it. You think you can sell that to a Republican primary electorate?
Let me just say this. I'm going to speak that because that's what I want to do. Okay, and hang on 2 seconds. Anyway, I'll hold it. I'll hold it. Because that's going to be a big part of it. I'm not going to go around the state and talk about fixing, which I just did, without telling you how it's going to be accomplished. Now, let them slam me for it, okay? But I will tell you this: that what we did in 2313 was enough to kind of catch up, to be able to maintain what we have and go on with a little bit of construction, okay? What we need to do in the future is build out. There is no money for 58. There's no money for I-73. It's a pipe dream. So we can do a couple of things. Either we can put a regional component in, like we did for Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia, or we can talk about generally across the state a graduated system where you pay more now and less. You pay actually much less if the prices ever go back up again. But I will also point out, and I think it's very, very interesting for everybody to understand, look at the price of the per gallon tax in North Carolina. It's twice what we have here in Virginia.
That's true.
Twice, okay? Look at the retail price of gasoline in North Carolina. It's the same. That's interesting, isn't it? That that the price is more. Retailers charge what retailers can charge.
Well, Senator John Miller made that argument. Senator Wagner, and of course, John Miller passing last year, no longer with us, but he made that argument many, many times on his show. I've only got 15 seconds. I have to get out, but I want to thank Senator Wagner, running for governor, to be here with us today live in the studio. And Senator, I got to get out. What's your website?
Just frankwagner.us. Come to frankwagner.us and come visit, look at the website. John, I rolled out something. It's going to be a little bit, it might be controversial, but I don't think so, because the people I talk to understand that in order to get this infrastructure built, it's got to be paid for. Okay. And in order to pay for it. Now, the other way we can do that is stimulate the economy. But we just talked about the two key problems. So let's talk about it. Let's get it out there. Quite frankly, I'm willing to air it. I want that as a distinct difference between myself and my opponent. And I also want to know from my opponent, since as operatives are saying we're going to attack him on this, that's great. I want to know from him, is he going to undo what happened there?
All right.
Very interesting.
With the 2013 transportation tax increase compromise. I'm out of time. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. Keep it right here.